Archbishop Winston Halapua is the Bishop of Polynesia. And last week he sent some photos to the Anglican Taonga website about some of the villages after Cyclone Winston. It's very unfortunate for our Archbishop that the cyclone got named after him. The photos that he sent show a family huddled under the floor of their house. It's where they waited for the cyclone to pass in fear for their lives. Now, in the photo, the foundations look pretty sturdy. They're kind of made of big, thick tree trunks, and the floor looks like it's really well fastened on, and it looked like a pretty good place to be in the storm. But then we're told that when the family emerged after 4 or 5 hours, they found their house up above the floor, completely gone, along with most of their village. This was the house where 2 years earlier, Bishop Winston had celebrated Easter with that village. And there's another photo that he sent of smiling children, mostly dressed in white, all gathered around the bishop, around the altar. They had celebrated Easter in that house because it was the chief's house and the most substantial place in the village. This village is remote. You won't find it on Google Maps. It's called Manaiava. It was built some 20 years ago by its people who are descendants of Solomon Islanders. And that means that in Fiji, they do not have the right to own land. And so they built this village in a remote area up in the mountains where no one would mind if landless people built some houses. And they planted their crops and they built a life there. The nearest school for their children is 2 hours walk away. And so in order for their children to go to school, the Anglican Missions Board helped them build a dormitory at the nearest school. And every Monday morning, the rostered parents who were on duty that week would walk the children to school, stay with them for the week, cook for them, and bring them home on Friday afternoon. That school and their dormitory were also destroyed in the cyclone. Bishop Winston says that the space that those people huddled in under the floorboards is like the tomb where Jesus was laid. And when they come out to find everything gone, they begin the task of caring for each other and working out how and where to start rebuilding. Help came to Manaiava eventually. Archbishop Winston visited to see what they needed, which was everything, and the help continues to come. That, he says, is the Easter Day part of their story. New life from absolutely nothing, hope when there should be none, and a story to be told. When Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, go to the tomb early on the Sunday morning, they are very distressed to find the tomb empty. And then, as if that's not enough, they are completely terrified by some men in dazzling clothes. Luke says they bow their heads to the ground. They are so frightened. Are they seeing visions? Are they seeing angels? Whoever these people are, they ask the women a question. Why do you look for the living among the dead? Why are you even looking here? Why are you looking in a tomb for someone who is alive? They are confused, of course, but they go and tell the 11, that is the 12 minus Judas, but the men dismiss this as an idle tale of women. Women are obviously so easily upset. They've got hysterical, it's an idle tale. Visions of angels indeed. Peter, though, just has a nagging doubt. And so he goes to the tomb just to make sure. He sees the empty tomb. He sees the grave cloths lying there. And then Luke says he went home. What does he go home to do? Have breakfast? Have lunch? He has no idea what to do with the news. Maybe that's more of a typical male reaction. waiting practically to know what's going on here before we start spreading these idle rumours of the women. But the women don't wait. They simply tell what they have seen. Even if they don't understand it, they proclaim it and they begin to live it. On Good Friday, I spoke about the silence of Jesus before Pilate, how we imagine him in those famous paintings, Pilate asking the questions, accusers accusing, the crowds shouting, and Jesus standing there silent. But after Jesus leaves Pilate's house, he does begin to talk. He talks to the women who are weeping, he talks to the criminals crucified with him, and he prays. Jesus breaks his silence and speaks the truth of his and others' suffering and manages to speak hope into the pain. And so then on Easter morning, it's the women's turn to break their silence and speak the truth about what they have seen and experienced. In Luke's version of the tale, they don't actually get to see Jesus that day. He appears first later in the day to the followers walking the road to Emmaus. But the women share what they know anyway, and it turns out not to be an idle tale. If we waited to be sure about our faith, if we waited to have the kind of physical proof that would satisfy the likes of Richard Dawkins, then we would not be here today. There would be no Easter, there would be no church. We don't get to see Jesus. We have the tale of the women and others to inform our faith. At times in our lives, we might be as perplexed as the women were. At other times, we might be terrified. And then at other times, we'll be disbelieving with Peter, or maybe convinced like Thomas was eventually. There's lots of room in the resurrection stories for a variety of feelings and a variety of reactions. We don't all have to think or believe exactly the same thing. I did an interview this week with a reporter from Radio Live who wanted to talk to me about the meaning of Easter. And he was most frustrated that he couldn't pin me down to his scenario of what he thought Christianity might be. He had it kind of written down, his little creed, and because I didn't agree with his interpretation of what he thought it was about, he got most frustrated. But we had fun in the interview. I think maybe, though, I had an easier time than the parishioner whose hairdresser this week asked him if Easter had anything to do with religion. The questions, though, of the angel are still relevant to us as we walk through the resurrection story, whatever we think. That question, why do you look for the living among the dead? Why do we look for life when there is none? Why do we expect happiness to come from the amount of money that we earn? Why do we expect the worst of people and not the best? Why does Twitter go crazy for bad news and not for good news? Why do we hang on to old, tired ideas or old ideals rather than seeking a new vision in our workplace or in our family or our community? The people of the village of Manaeva had no choice when they emerged from their tomb. There was nothing for them to hang on to from the past. They had to start again, completely and utterly. Bishop Winston writes that he is so very grateful for all the gifts that have been sent to help the church there and that we continue to send. But he also says this in his message. There is an issue here that lies beneath what has happened. It's not an issue that we can afford to go into right now, but it's there nonetheless. And I firmly believe it's the reason this cyclone was the most destructive of all. And that is, of course, the issue of climate change. What I'm saying to Australia and New Zealand is that it's so good for you to help us so generously, and you know that. but we also desperately need help to address climate change. Will you help us in that way as well? So the angel's question, why do you look for the living among the dead, also applies to us as a whole community, a world community. Why do we seek to find life in our carbon and oil use? Why do we not see that our consumption is destroying our sisters and brothers just up the road in Fiji and the other Pacific islands? Every time Bishop Winston goes to an international meeting, a church meeting, every time he's here at a synod or a church gathering, any time you ask him to preach, he eventually comes around to one topic, and that is the topic of climate change, because that's all that matters to them in Fiji now. The people of Manaiava can claim life in all its fullness and all its wholeness. They're not afraid to begin again. They're not afraid to build from the ground up. But how many times will this happen? This Easter morning, they'll be hearing the same words that we heard from Isaiah today. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not labor in vain. I'm sure they're going to hear those words this morning as words of wonderful hope directed at them specifically. But they depend on us and the peoples of the world to make that hope a reality. On Easter Day, we are called to step out of the tombs of our lives, the things that hold us back from new life, both as individuals and as a world community. So claim life, claim joy, claim hope. It's not an idle tale, it's a tale which brings us life.